3, 2, 1. Good evening. I'm Steve Root, Chief of Communications for the VA Greater Los Angeles Healthcare System here at the West Los Angeles campus. Tonight, we're going to go through the Enhanced Use Lease public notice to talk about what transformations that are going to happen here on our campus. I'd like to let you know that tonight's slide deck is available at our website, westladraftmasterplan.org, and you can find it there right now if you go ahead and click on that website. It's westladraftmasterplan.org. That slide deck that's there is not 100% 508 compliant, but by the end of this closes out at the end of July, we will update that with all relevant information, and the slide deck that you will be able to have full access to at that time will be 508 compliant, so everybody can see it. And I appreciate that. Tonight, we'll discuss another crucial step towards the development of a vibrant community on West LA's campus where veterans experience homelessness for the veterans and for the family. We have with us Dr. Stephen Brentwood, the director of the VA GLA. We have with us Mr. Mac Mchenrick, the executive director for the master plan and SERS. We also have in the room with us the executive director for OC4, well, it used to be OC4, but now it's Ambulatory Care Services, and that is Mr. Rob Merchant. So, moving right along. Before answering any questions, we'll provide some background on the development of the West Los Angeles Master Plan and provide a short update on progress to date. We'll describe the VA's statutory authority to enter into and experience developing proposed enhanced use lease projects across the country before a more detailed review of the work envisioned under the proposed EUL that is subject of our hearing tonight. Under that proposed EUL, the West LA Veterans Collective, VA's competitively selected principal developer, will develop at least 900 of the master plan's total 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans and their families. We welcome your input on plans to continue to expedite housing for homeless veterans and their family. This public hearing is being held virtually due to the ongoing COVID-19 related public health emergency and pandemic. As published in the public hearing notice as of June 16, 2020, California's Department of Public Health continues to prohibit gatherings that bring together people in a single room or a single space at the same time, such as an auditorium, stadium, arena, large conference room, meeting hall, cafeteria, or any other indoor or outdoor space. The VA determined that this public hearing shall be conducted virtually to maximize participation while minimizing the public health risk. The VA notes that other federal agencies have also hosted virtual public meetings to satisfy their public outreach and engagement obligations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Connecting to this hearing, conference number 1-800-767-1750. That's 1-800-767-1750. The access code is 73527#. 73527#. If you happen to lose us during the live broadcast, and for some reason your internet falls off, you can always call us on that number again, 1-800-767-1750, the participation code, 73527#. Link to the meeting, well, if you see me, you have the link. Public engagement, questions or comments. Please continue to write your questions to us during this live broadcast. I have a couple moderators stand by. We can take your questions anytime, and we'll assign that question to the appropriate person who's going to answer and respond to that question later on around 5:45 this evening, about 45 minutes. You can continue to send emails to me at Stephen, STEVEN.RUH, R-U-H, at va.gov, or you can send them to Miss Janet Rice at JANET.Rice, R-I-C-E, the number 2 at va.gov. Following the presentation, the moderator, me, will read the questions and the comments received during or before the hearing with time permitting. The VA will publish a summary of the written questions, comments received, and responses within 90 days of this meeting, and you can find those at the West LA draftmasterplan.org website. Questions, comment not related to the EUL tonight and community plan under review tonight will be forwarded to the appropriate VA person for a follow-up, and we will follow up with all the questions. Future status updates to the VA GLA HS Master Plan website for future town halls. You can continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can continue to email us the questions. At this time, I'm going to introduce Dr. Stephen Braverman, the Director for VA GLA HS. Sir.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this public hearing. Tonight, this is an important step in trying to bring you information toward the development of a vibrant community for our homeless population. Our goal here is to give you information that you can use to make informed decisions and ask questions so that you're comfortable with the plan that we have moving forward. Before answering those questions, we want to provide some background on that development plan and be able to then give you answers either this evening, depending upon the volume of questions and our ability to answer them with the facts at hand, or be able to provide that information at a later date along with the compliance slides. Before I get to that, I want to just give you a quick update on what we've been doing to address our COVID pandemic that we have going on here in Los Angeles and across the world. Since the inception of the pandemic, we've put policies and procedures in place with the goal of protecting not only our veterans but our employees as well, but really focusing on veterans in those vulnerable populations, those homeless veterans that are unable to isolate themselves, and people in residential areas like the domiciliary and our nursing homes. And we've been very successful in that. To date, we've identified 306 veterans who have tested positive for COVID-19 within our catchment area. We expect there's about 50 others who have been seen elsewhere but not seen in our facility. And at the same time, we've been able to decrease that number and keep our inpatient requirements stable, currently at 14, because we work with the community to go out to the various nursing homes and do our best through testing and containment to decrease any of the outbreaks with our veterans in the nursing homes. Now, recently, actually just this last week, under an agreement with the state of California, we are working as part of VA's fourth mission to support the community in times of emergency and taking on humanitarian missions to take on inpatients here in our own facility. To date, we've taken 2 transfers from people in Imperial County because of their overwhelmed situation when it comes to COVID. We'll continue to do that, and so not only are we in a situation where serving our veterans, we're also in a situation where we can serve the community at large. We're very proud to do that as well. With that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Mchenrick, our GLA's Executive Director of the Community Engagement Reintegration Service and the Master Plan. So, Mac?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to talk about the VA Greater Los Angeles healthcare system, and the West LA campus is the hub of the system here, and it sits on the 1887 Pacific branch of the National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers, of course donated back in the 1887-88 era. The West LA campus serves as the hub, and it's where we have our VA Medical Center on this 388 acres. But we have 11 sites of care, and we serve over 90,000 veterans. We operate in Kern County, LA County, SLO, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County. I also wanted to talk about the 2011 ACLU class action suit that was filed, where there were allegations that the VA misused the West LA campus by failing to maintain housing for veterans and by leasing portions of it to private companies. That lawsuit was eventually settled in 2004 when the VA and the plaintiff partners agreed to a settlement where the VA would set out to define the most effective purpose of the campus for veterans, particularly for homeless veterans, including underserved populations such as female veterans, aging veterans, and those who are severely or mentally disabled. Next slide, please. In 2015, the VA, Veteran Service Organizations, Veterans, Settlement Partners participated in numerous meetings. Those are all available on our website, and we'll talk about that later today. The draft master plan was developed in 2016, and it was to really develop a vibrant community that would develop here on the West LA campus and be linked to the communities around it as well as the rest of the county. And it would provide housing for homeless veterans, health care, benefits, entitlement, programs and services, as well as other services for eligible veterans. That's not to say there won't be elsewhere in the GLA or in the VA, but here we really wanted to focus on bringing those to bear to the veterans in the community and the veterans that use this campus. Because VA has no authority to build housing, we rely on the 2016 West LA Leasing Act. That authorized the VA to enter into enhanced use leases. And you'll hear a lot more about that this evening of what they entail and how they operate, but they're basically to develop and operate permanent supportive housing on this campus is what we're going to use them for. The West LA Leasing Act enables VA to enter into leases. Now, a lease is different than the enhanced use lease. And we'll talk about the difference here, but a service lease or a lease is to provide other supportive services for veterans that principally benefit veterans, such as nutrition and spiritual wellness programs, training, recreation, family support services, and transportation. All those other wraparound things that are necessary to sustain a population here. Next slide, please. Part of the master plan included what we're trying to move to the southern campus, which is principally the medical services, a new critical care center, a new, we have the bed tower here in Building 500, our VA Medical Center, but to provide a new one, as well as a new consolidated research facility here on the South Campus, and a new ambulatory care center, as well as other things. The plan contemplated increased access to the campus, not only across the campus, north and south, but also across the community, to make it easier for veterans to get here, for employees to get here as well, and for those who want to visit veterans here, whether it be family or friends, to also get here. Enhanced public transportation included the Metro bus, Santa Monica Big Blue bus, the Dash LA Department of Transportation bus, and the LA Metro subway station. Before engaging in these projects, I want to talk about a little bit of a challenge we had to go through, which was good. We had to do a programmatic environmental impact statement and a Natural Environmental Protection Act compliance procedures and the Natural Historic Preservation Act procedures. By going through those and working with those agencies, it took us about 2 years, and it really gave us the authority to go ahead with many of the projects that we have planned. Some were previously approved under other studies, but these studies took nearly 2 years for research assessment and then finally a record of decision in September of 2019. So when the initial draft master plan came out, it hadn't anticipated that almost 2-year period, but we're past that and we're moving along, and that's part of what we're doing here today, is moving forward with our construction efforts. Next slide, please. So from a master plan point of view, in the portfolio that I manage here, I really look at the North Campus, the activities there in the South Campus and what we're doing there. On the North Campus, we're moving forward with 180 units of permanent supportive housing and hope to have that online by mid to late 2022. We also have an additional 150 units which should be available in mid-2023. So within 2 years and then another year after that, we should have this 300 plus units of housing available on the campus. On the South Campus, I talked about we're doing development to our bed tower, our critical care center, consolidating the research, which helps us open up some space on the North Campus for the housing. We're consolidating it all down into research facilities on the South Campus, and a new ambulatory care center, a new kitchen, a new parking lot, and a new power plant on the South Campus. The power plant is important because we need to be sure that we're working to upgrade the infrastructure, not only on the North Campus through a trunk line that will provide more gas, power, sewer, water, all those things to sustain the housing on the North Campus, but also on the South Campus for the medical center and research and ambulatory care center, all the medical needs on the South Campus. So upgrades in infrastructure that's being studied now on both North and South. The LA Metro connection, that's authorized by the West LA Leasing Act, and it's still under negotiations, and eventually we hope to have negotiations completed and easement in place for the construction and operation of a station, which is really the central point to the connectivity to the community and throughout the region. I'll be followed by Brett Sims, the Executive Director of the Office of Asset Enterprise Management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. Again, this is Brett Sims. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Asset Enterprise Management based out of Washington, D.C. I'm going to be covering a number of topics today related specifically to the Enhanced Use Lease program. What we're going to start with is essentially an overview of what an Enhanced Use Lease is. We'll talk a little bit about the statutory authority that we have that allows us to enter into Enhanced Use Leases. We'll also talk about this public hearing and the purpose and the intent of it. Then we'll get into the specific proposed Enhanced Use Lease that we're entering into with the West LA Veterans Collective. We'll talk about the objectives of that lease. We'll talk about the principal developer, which is the West LA Veterans Collective, the approach to the Enhanced Use Lease, and then the impacts of what that lease would do. Once I've covered the basic information on that, we're going to turn it over to the principal developer team, who will go through their overview of the community and neighborhood that they've started the plans for. And then at the end, we'll move into the question and answer session. To begin with, let's talk a little bit about what an Enhanced Use Lease is. An Enhanced Use Lease is a VA authority that allows us to outlease some of our underutilized property, which can be land and or buildings. And the intent is to redevelop those assets into public or permanent and supportive housing for homeless or at-risk veterans. The unique authority that VA has under the Enhanced Use Lease is there partly, as I think Mr. Braverman noted, that we don't have the authority to actually build and operate housing ourselves. So this authority allows us to partner with third parties who can do that on our behalf. They're non-VA entities who do the financing, the construction or renovation, and they operate the housing. The term of an Enhanced Use Lease can be up to 75 years. And since 1991, when VA first got the Enhanced Use Lease authority, we've executed more than 100 EULs, and out of those, 47 of them are operational housing EULs across the country that are delivering 3,100 plus units of housing. To the right of the slide, we have a couple of examples of completed Enhanced Use Leases in California. The first one at the top is our Menlo Park EUL. This one provides 60 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless and at-risk veterans. And then at the bottom, we have our Sepulveda EUL, which is actually multiple buildings that provides more than 140 units of permanent supportive housing. From an authority standpoint, 38 U.S. Code 8161 through 8169 is the base of the Enhanced Use Lease Authority. That is combined in the case of the West Los Angeles campus with the West Los Angeles Leasing Act of 2016, and that's Public Law 114226. So VA does have the authority to enter into enhanced use leases anywhere. However, there are some additional specific requirements for West LA, including in the Leasing Act. EULs require the Secretary of VA to approve them, and it also requires that VA provide oversight through the life of the lease. And again, that can be a very long time. That can be up to 75 years that VA is providing that annual oversight and compliance monitoring for these leases. In the case of these leases, VA can refer veterans to the housing. There's also other ways for veterans to be referred into the housing. Once the housing is in operation, VA does monitoring of that along with our third-party partners who are doing the operations on a day-to-day basis. As part of the EUL process, as Mac just described, there's a number of statutory requirements and laws that we have to follow. The EUL program is not exempt from those. So VA and the EUL developer must comply with those laws, such as the National Environmental Policy Act, which is what the PEIS and the ROD are related to, as well as the National Historic Preservation Act. Any other applicable federal, state, and local regulations also must be followed. One of those carve-outs that I mentioned in the West LA Leasing Act of 2016 is that it explicitly prohibits the sale of the land. So all property or improvements that go under an enhanced use lease at the West LA campus will return to VA at the end of that lease. That's a specific requirement to West LA, so that property cannot be disposed of even if it's under an enhanced use lease. As part of the statutory requirement in Title 38, 8163 describes this public hearing and the purpose of that. The intent is twofold. First, it's to describe what property and what the intended use of that property will be under the enhanced use lease that we're proposing to do. It also gives an opportunity for VSOs, residents, community, neighborhood, or any other stakeholder who has an interest in this project to hear and understand what the proposed project entails and to provide comments, feedback, and questions on what they're seeing. This is the intent of tonight's public hearing, is to provide that overview and to let our partner, the West LA Veterans Collective, you'll also hear them referred to as the principal developer, to explain what their proposal is for the community and neighborhood on the West LA campus. The objectives of the enhanced use lease that we're proposing tonight really is to build upon the already successful enhanced use lease projects that we have going on. First of all, we've got Building 209. Building 209 has been in operation since 2017. There's 54 units of housing, and that's run and operated by Shangri-La and Step Up. Building 205 and 208 is starting construction this summer. There's already progress being made on that front, and full-blown construction is expected to start soon, with the occupancy intended to be around Q2 of calendar year 2022. Those two buildings combined will provide about another 120 units of housing. Building 207 is next up. Building 207, we are nearing the point at which construction can begin, and we anticipate that'll start in the Q4 of this calendar year, with occupancy anticipated in Q3 of calendar year 2022. Building 207 is actually being done by one of our West LA Veteran Collective partners, and that is Thomas Safran and Associates. They are part of the principal developer team that will be talking to you here shortly. And then the last sort of ongoing project is the Macarthur Field. This one is a new construction enhanced use lease that we're expecting to start in Q1 of calendar year 2022 and occupancy in Q3 of calendar year 2023. That will start with 74 units in the first phase, and it'll be followed by a phase 2, which will have an additional 74 units. So all told, the EULs that we have in progress comes to roughly about 300 units of housing. What we're anticipating is that the principal developer team will essentially develop the remaining 900 units on campus, at least 900 units, to get us to the 1,200 units that were contemplated in the draft master plan. talk a little bit about the principal developer. As you saw, we've got a number of projects that are underway. The goal of the principal developer concept was essentially to select a single entity that was going to be responsible for delivering the remaining housing. That allows VA to work with a single partner. It also allows that partner to look at the campus and the redevelopment holistically and how that can be converted into a neighborhood and a community that ties together nicely across, regardless whether the building is a new building, an existing building that's being retrofitted. We wanted someone that had that bird's eye view so they could control and manage across multiple projects. The West LA Veterans Collective was selected as that principal developer in November of 2018. It was a competitive process that we, VA issued a request for qualifications and selected the West LA Veterans Collective as the partner for this project. West LA Veterans Collective is a composition of 3 companies, Thomas Safran and Associates, Century Housing, and the United States Vets Initiative, or US Vets. They'll be talking to you shortly about some of the plans and ideas they have for campus redevelopment. Although those 3 companies make up the collective, they're also going to be bringing in partners to help them through this process, whether it's for the planning, whether it's from the design, communications, different factors like that. They will bring in experts in those areas to assist them as they move through the development of those 900 additional units. What we're proposing to do in this enhanced use lease is to enter into that lease with the West LA Veterans Collective, and it spans multiple assets across the North Campus at West LA. There's specific buildings to be included. Those buildings are in the slide. There's multiple buildings that would be repurposed, and those buildings would be essentially done as adaptive reuse for homeless housing. There's also a number of parking lots or just acreage where there isn't improvements today included in this. And there's also a number of other assets that were included in the request for qualifications that could be identified for use as housing. The enhanced use lease we're proposing would actually be a blend of that reuse of existing buildings as well as new construction. With existing buildings, it could be expansion and additional development on those buildings. It could be renovation or reuse of those buildings. Or there may be some demolition of existing buildings to enable new construction to be brought in and additional housing to be created. The housing will not all be delivered at once. It will be delivered in a set of phases. Those phases start with essentially the work that's going on now and already in operation for buildings 209, 205, 208, 207, and Macarthur Field, and then it'll span out multiple years as additional phases of housing are brought online by the principal developer team. The south side of the campus is intended to house the majority of VA healthcare facilities. Mac alluded to that. The North Campus will be the focus of the housing development. We're proposing the full term of 75 years, and at the end of that, as required by the West LA Leasing Act, all of the property and improvements will revert back to VA at no cost. There's a number of benefits that we believe this enhanced use lease is going to provide. Specifically, a couple of them are to revitalize the campus. Part of the enhanced use lease program's purpose is to actually reuse assets that we don't have an identified use for. So vacant and underutilized property that can be redeveloped and revitalize the campus into a therapeutic community. That housing will also provide a significant quality of life for veterans and their families to provide the housing, as well as some of those wraparound services that will come with the housing. It also being located on the campus provides great and convenient access to healthcare benefits and other support services that are located on the campus there. One of the things you'll hear from the principal developer team is discussion about things like a transportation hub and access to and from different parts of the campus. That provides a great and benefit in that convenient access from housing to those GLA-provided services. That includes the health care, with the intent of that health care being available to those veterans in the housing to improve their access to that health care. And it also, of course, would go to reduce the veteran homelessness in the greater Los Angeles area to provide them with housing opportunities in the 900-plus units to be developed. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the principal developer team, and I believe Brian DeAndrea is going to begin speaking on their plans for the work that they're going to do on the North Campus.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Brett. Good evening to the entire, and thank you to the entire VA team and members of the public, including all of our veterans, for joining us today. My name is Brian DeAndrea. I'm Senior Vice President with Century Housing Corporation. I'm here today joined with my colleagues from the West LA Veterans Collective. And as Brett mentioned, this evening we'll be providing a brief introduction to our team along with an overview of the community plan and future EUL activity that we've been working on since our selection back in November 2018. The Collective is a partnership comprised of 3 LA-based organizations: Century Housing Corporation, Thomas Safran Associates, and US Vets. Together, our teams have decades of experience serving and housing our veterans in LA County and beyond. 2 of our organizations are actually nonprofits that are led by veterans, and both of which were founded by the late Judge Harry Pregerson. Judge Pregerson himself was a wounded World War II veteran that dedicated his life and his work on the bench to serving the community's most vulnerable, including our veterans. And his spirit very much lives on in our work. Our third partner, TSA, Thomas Safran Associates, is based right here in Brentwood, just a short distance from the VA. Our 3 organizations have a rich history of working together in places like the villages at Cabrillo and Long Beach, which has proven to be a useful model for us. And collectively, I think I can speak on all of our behalves in sharing that we feel a tremendous sense of responsibility about our role as principal developer. Since we were selected back in November of 2018, we've worked hand in hand with our partner at the VA to plan for this massive transformation of the North Campus at the West LA VA. And together, we're committed to truly transforming the community into a vibrant and healing place for our veterans. Our team's commitment is really captured in our mission statement, and that's a mission that revolves around the successful transition and recovery of our veterans, helping to promote their wellness and a more hopeful future, and that we all believe is a future that our veterans deserve, given the many sacrifices they've made for all of us. We initiated our planning efforts back in late 2018 by starting with a set of guiding principles. To give you a few examples of what these look like, we acknowledge that the voice of our veterans is of paramount importance. We're embracing a holistic view of the community. This is more than simply about housing. It's about wellness, about connections, about opportunity, about pride. We're about being responsible stewards for the built and natural environment, including the very historic fabric of this community. And we're committed to exercising modesty in our redevelopment while uplifting the historic fabric of the place. Sorry about that. For those of you that have visited the property, you understand what a sprawling piece of property it is. At the outset, our team began with a set of urban design strategies to help guide our planning and development activities. These include strategies like creating a sense of hierarchy and order, concentrating or clustering our development activities to promote social interactions and service efficiencies, and fostering connections to area resources and amenities. But in the end, our focus is really on transforming this campus into a supportive and thriving community for our veterans. And in tonight's presentation, you'll see many of these strategies come alive. From the most recent homeless count, which was just conducted, we know that tonight there'll be more than 3,900 veterans experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County. It's a diverse population: senior veterans, veteran families, and women veterans with children. There are thousands more veterans that are at risk of homelessness and are one paycheck away. All of us at the Collective and at the VA view this as an unacceptable reality, and we collectively share a sense of urgency to house and serve our veterans, including those most in need. The VA's EUL program is a mechanism to change that reality. Next, I'll turn things over to Oscar Alvarado, our Vice President of Development at Century.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to provide an overview of our community planning, delve into the phasing of the veterans housing, and talk a little bit about the major concentration spaces that we will be creating within the community. I'll start by saying that our planning work has been influenced by the point-in-time homeless count, the campus-wide programmatic agreement, the West LA Leasing Act, and the framework draft master plan. This slide is an overview comparison of a zone map from the draft master plan at the left and our community plan zone map at the right. This illustrates that we've kept with the general location of uses from the draft master plan. The veteran housing, the town center, care coordination zones have only slightly morphed in shape from the draft master plan. Here we have an overall composite for the community plan. The area in green is our sphere of influence within the larger VA North Campus. The various phases of housing development are shown in shades of blue. We'll take those in turn in the following slides. Areas in solid and hatched orange are community spaces, and these occur generally as ground floor activity within housing development. Starting with phase 0, the area in the green background delineates the projects in this particular phase, which include 238 homes, largely clustered at the north end of the map in a courtyard with 3 existing buildings. One of these is already in operation, and the 2 others are set to be renovated in the near future. These buildings will have EULs with developers outside the principal development team. The lone building at the center of the plan is Building 207, which, as was mentioned earlier, is the principal development team's first development on the North Campus. Financing has already been secured for the project, and renovations are set to begin late this fall. Moving on to phase 1, you'll notice as we move through the presentation that the team has made efforts to cluster development activity in a north to south manner within the community plan area. This is to minimize areas disrupted by construction at any one time. Also, grouping projects this way helps create efficiencies with the necessary infrastructure work needed to support the veteran housing. Once operational, the clustered buildings will help create a sense of neighborhood and community for our residents. Phase 1 includes the first new construction buildings located on the North Campus, which, as mentioned before, will be developed in Macarthur Field and the area known as Area 402 at the top left section of the plan. The principal development team is already undergoing pre-development activities for 3 of the projects within this phase, and we'll be working on assembling financing for these over the next year. Phase 1 will add 632 homes to the North Campus when complete, and will bring the total of homes to 870. Moving on to phase 2, shown in dark green background. This phase will add 469 homes to the plan, bringing the running total to 1,339 homes. Activities are largely clustered around a series of new buildings highlighted in the middle of the plan. These buildings are arranged to form a town square. The areas in hatched orange represent ground floor veteran-serving community uses within new housing developments that help form a center for social activity within the community. Also, Historic Building 13 will be renovated as part of this phase. This building is expected to contain community-wide civic uses, including potentially a relocated post office and property management offices. Phase 3 activity is concentrated within a courtyard shown at the bottom left of the plan. The buildings that exist will be demolished by VA to make way for 3 new veteran housing buildings that will add 254 homes to the community. Our final phase, phase 4, includes the last 98 homes in our plan and involves the renovation of 2 existing buildings in the community. These buildings currently house users that will be relocated elsewhere on campus to make way for the veteran housing. This slide details concentration of activity at the northern end of our community plan, the area that we are calling the North Village. Along with the veteran housing, the North Village will hold a cluster of distinct amenities centered on the holistic, mental, physical, and emotional health of our veterans. Building 300 will include extensive ground floor space catering to the wellness of veterans, including peer support, a large gym, and other social services. This slide details a second clustering of activity that we are calling the South Village in Town Square. Buildings 407 through 410 with orange hatching on the map flank a future Town Square. These are new veteran housing buildings with ground floor spaces that together create a central hub of activity. Historic Building 13 will serve as a town hall within this area, potentially housing uses such as a relocated post office, property management offices, and a shuttle stop to connect veterans to the coming Metro line. From here, I'll go ahead and pass things on to my colleague Tyler Monroe to continue the presentation.
Tyler, I think you're muted.
My apologies. Thank you, Oscar. The proposed community plan includes provision of new housing through a combination of both rehabilitation of existing structures and new construction. Approximately 40% of the total contemplated units are provided through rehabilitation and 60% through new construction. Rehabilitation of existing structures will preserve and enhance the campus heritage. The slide before you shows the two different types of construction as they're sprinkled throughout the contemplated community plan. Oscar spoke to the phasing and got into more detail about it. This combines all of the housing into one slide to show that we achieve a minimum of 1,200 units, in fact, a little over 1,300 units through phase 2. The slide before you shows that it's consolidated. It specifically illustrates that we plan to achieve the minimum 1,200 units by the end of phase 2, and we were able to achieve more than 1,600 units through phase 4. The community plan contemplates various types of circulation through the campus to improve organization, access and opportunities for pedestrians, bicycles, public transportation, and accessible paths of travel. The primary vehicular access running north-south from Wilshire Boulevard is planned to remain on Bonsall. We contemplate access control at various locations on campus as shown by large bold arrows. One location is at the south end of the North Campus to prevent riders of the future Metro Purple Line from using the VA campus as a park and ride location to access the transit. We also continue to preserve access control at the east and west to prevent vehicular cut-through traffic while still allowing for pedestrians and bikes to make their way through. We also contemplate a transportation hub at the heart of the housing community near Building 13. We have collaborated extensively with VA and local utility companies to identify extraordinary infrastructure needs that are required in order to support all the new housing. We have prioritized immediate needs to deliver a minimum of 1,200 units as quickly as possible. These include electrical, gas, telecommunications, water, sewer, and storm drain improvements. These improvements are anticipated to be paid through a combination of VA capital contributions, contributions from individual enhanced use lease projects, local, state, and other federal sources. Our first infrastructure project is an important one, and it is to install a utility backbone with new electrical, gas, and telecommunication services for all contemplated housing that it will be complete as part of the construction on Building 207. The slide before you shows where the line comes up Bonsall from Constitution and begins to serve buildings 207, 205, 208, and 209, but that same line for telecommunications, gas, and electricity will serve all housing units that are contemplated as part of the project. The project is expected to start in the fall of 2020 and be complete in 2021, and potential funding for this work is anticipated from a VA capital contribution. What's next? Over the next year, the principal developer, together with the VA and our other partners, will incorporate community and stakeholder input into this draft community plan. We will start work on the Bonsall utility work, continue coordination for water, sewer, and storm drain upgrades, and commence pre-development due diligence and design activities on phase 1 projects. The constraints that we're working on in order to effectuate this new development include public funding limitations, timing and availability at the local, state, and federal levels. We have limited public funding sources available locally, at the county, and at the state. So we'll have to work with our various stakeholders in order to access those sources. Many of them are competitive and are only available a limited number of times per year. And we will also continue to coordinate with VA and other utility providers to upgrade utility and other infrastructure, but those are the constraints that we're working with currently in order to effectuate the housing development. And with that, I'll hand it off to my colleague Steve Peck, CEO and President of US Vets.
Good evening. Let me get to the slide. So I'm going to talk about the amenities and services that we're going to be providing on site. US Vets has been around for 26 years and have been providing services to veterans during that time. And as Brian and Deandra mentioned before, we collaborate on the Villages of Cabrillo in Long Beach, which is currently the largest housing project in the country. There we go. Okay, I was seeing myself, you weren't seeing me. So a community is built up not only of the housing, it is built up of the people in that housing. And we at US Vets always create a therapeutic community, bringing veterans together, helping them help each other to progress to their highest quality of life. There'll be a town center, there'll be numerous places for veterans to gather, to congregate. We want them, these places, in order to help them build this community. There'll be the transit plaza, access to the neighborhood in the larger city, so it will really feel like a true neighborhood rather than a VA campus. I mentioned a therapeutic approach. We bring veterans together and really encourage them to help themselves progress to a better life. We have town councils, town halls regularly to listen to them and listen to their concerns and their needs. Each building will have a resident council that will be really in touch with what's going on in that building and the veterans in that building. We often learn from these councils what's going on with the individual veterans, if they're having challenges, if they've disappeared. And in this way, we can really stay in touch with the more than 1,500 veterans that will ultimately be on campus. We have case management staff, we have psychologists, we have career specialists, so all of the services that the veterans are going to need to move forward are going to be on campus. We'll also be using peers, veterans who have maybe been there, done that, been through the things that some of these veterans have been through, to help them work through their issues. We mount multiple therapeutic groups at all of our campuses. I think in Cabrillo there's something like 30 groups every week. Everything you can imagine from NA to money management to post-traumatic stress, and all the things that they need to strengthen in order to live a full life. And some of them will elect to move off campus back into their community, potentially reunite with their families. We really want them to live the best life that they can. We measure the success. We use evidence-based practices, and knowing that the veterans are going to need the highest level of care, particularly mental health care, that they need. Obviously, they'll have ready access to the South Campus where they can get their medical care. We practice trauma-informed care. We know that many of the veterans have had challenging lives and have experienced trauma of some sort, if not during the time that they were homeless, then in combat. So we want to be conscious of that and train all of our staff so that there's nothing that we are doing to re-traumatize them. We want to create a place of safety and trust so that they can progress effectively. We'll be working with the community to bring services on site. We know that there is a number of services already being provided in the community, and some of them are coming on campus. So we'll connect with them and bring them into the multiple areas on campus where we will be providing services. It was mentioned Building 300 will be the hub of our services at the North Village, but other buildings will as well have conference rooms, meeting rooms, counseling rooms, so that multiple assistance can be provided to the veterans on campus. We've been reaching out to the community to inform them about what we're doing for well over a year now, meeting with all of the groups that may be impacted by the community that we're going to build there, including the Brentwood community. We've done multiple presentations to them, all the various veterans groups that are meeting, including the Veterans Collaborative, the CVED, the Oversight Group, and anyone who might be interested in what's going on there or might be interested in helping. We want to keep them abreast of what we're doing. So we've also been talking to the city and the county so that they realize what it is that we're doing and maybe what our needs are if they can help us. And I'm going to hand it to Brian.
Thank you, Steve. Yep, just to close things out on our end, as you can imagine, the development of a significant, thriving community is a process that will play out over time. From our perspective, the concept of ongoing and continuous engagement with the veteran community is an important process, and that will help us respond to needs as they change over time. Our team continues to collect feedback on the draft community plan while we are moving forward with the implementation of the initial phase 0 of that plan. We encourage the community to complete the online survey that's listed here on the screen, and we encourage you to stay in touch with us as we move forward. And so with that, we will conclude the principal developer presentation, and I'll turn things back over to the VA to assist with the Q&A session.
Good evening again, guests. This is Steve Root, Chief Communications for the Greater Los Angeles VA. You've heard from the principal developer, the OAEM, you've heard from us. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open up to questions and answers, and we're going to start reading aloud your questions, and then we'll call for the appropriate person to come and answer. The first question: when will the Brentwood school lease be canceled? If not, why not? Mac?
Thank you for the question. The Brentwood School current lease term runs through the year 2026. That's when it expires.
Thank you, sir. The VA must significantly finance VA police in support of housing for the safety and security for veterans, employees, and neighbors.
Thank you. In these studies, we're very well aware that we're adding quite a bit of population to the campus. The police force is designated to protect the population on the campus as well as those critical care center areas that we have, to do patrol across our streets. So the police force is right-sized not only for the size of the campus and the work they do to keep us safe and to protect the environment, but if you can imagine adding several thousand more veterans and family members to the campus, adding them to the campus, you can imagine we will need that many more police to protect those environments and those communities that we're building on the campus. So we're well aware of that. We are going to integrate our safety and security with not only our police force and the security officers that work with the police, but with the plans for the principal developers for the different buildings. And if the principal developer would like to add any comments, I would welcome that.
Okay, so our next question. What are the plans to allow safe pedestrians, wheelchair, and bicycle connections from the site to Brentwood and to Westwood? Current paths onto the 405 are unacceptable and unsafe, not ADA compliant. Sepulveda does not have sidewalks. The cemetery gate has been closed after 9/11, making movement of people very difficult in this area. Matt?
To the side. I assigned everyone. Hang on just a second. You need to look them up and see who they're assigned to. Okay, so let me try and answer that. There was a glitch in that the comment got deleted and was repopulated, so we weren't quite clear on who it got assigned to. I can answer a portion of it, and then I'll ask the principal developer to answer another portion, and they should be able to. Is that right? The mic will be open? Okay. So the Sepulveda piece is actually not part of this EUL discussion. In Sepulveda, we can look at the campus and see which areas are not ADA compliant. That's not difficult to do. We'll check on that. The cemetery has their protocols for services. What they can't do is allow large crowds and people to move on to the cemetery during the COVID period, so they have shut the gate for a period of time. I assume they will open it once it's safe enough to do that. If the principal developer could discuss the streets and the access on the campus as they foresee it in their designs, I know that once the communities come online on the campus here at West LA, we will work with them to ensure we have better access on and off the campus and better avenues for those communities in and around the campus as well as off the campus. And I did talk previously about the transportation links and how important those would be. So if the principal developers help.
Thank you, Mac. This is Tyler with the principal developer. We agree with everything you said, and we're obviously planning on collaborating with VA to make those linkages happen. As it relates to within the area that is within the purview of the principal developer, we absolutely plan to make accessible paths of travel new and improved throughout. Our first project, VA2, the building 207, new sidewalks are being put in on both Vandergrift and Bonsall, as well as new connections to the west of building 207. So accessible paths of travel are absolutely part of our plan.
Okay, folks, some of these questions that we did take earlier that got deleted by mistake, we're covering those questions right now. And if you don't get the answer from us tonight, go ahead and send those questions to me again, and we'll send those out to the appropriate people. I apologize for that. At this time, we'll ask the next question. The question comes from James Maddox. You mentioned families. What about veterans with children? How do you propose to ensure their safety? Will registered sex offenders who are veterans be allowed? This question is for the principal developer. Mr. Peck, are you with us, sir? Steve Peck?
I am. Are you hearing me? As I mentioned before,
Yes, we hear you.
we have a model for this. Sorry? We have a model for this at our villages at Cabrillo, where we have single veterans, female veterans, veterans with families, and other formerly homeless families from the community. There are several hundred kids of varying ages at the site, and we monitor that very closely. We do check for any sexual predators, sexual offenders, so that they are not allowed on site. And the kids there, as everything that I have seen, the kids there feel very safe and mix well with the veterans on site. As I said, it is a neighborhood. It is even though it's for veterans only, it is a neighborhood, and it acts like a neighborhood. And veterans and others on campus take care and are watching out for other people.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. Next question. Why do I feel the purple line is being pushed for the benefit of the West Los Angeles, Brentwood, and Santa Monica residents?
Thanks, Steve. The purple line, we talked about transportation earlier. If you go back in the history, there was a trolley line on this campus back in the 1900s. It was clear that the veterans wanted to travel, that others wanted to travel out here, and there's some historical documents out there that talk about the time period and folks coming out to visit with the veterans on this campus. Transportation is an essential part of not only the campus but the community. One of the goals that we have is integration and reintegration into the community and our environments. That's where our jobs come from. That's where the employees come from to work here and provide services to veterans. Transportation is a key part of what we do here and how we fit into the community that surrounds us. The purple line is an advantage to us here at West LA, not only for the veterans here who want to come here, it's also an advantage for the employees who are going to care for the veterans to be able to get here. It's challenging to recruit in the greater LA area because of traffic. One of the advantages we will have is a major transit line right here to help us bring more employees in to serve the veterans that we're caring for. So I don't see it as a competition at all. I see it as a benefit and a good thing for us. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mac. The next question comes from James, and James asks, will we have a playground for the veterans' children here on campus? And I'm going to ask Stephen Peck to answer that, our principal developer.
Yes, there'll be a playground, and actually there'll be various places where children can play in several of the buildings. We don't just want just one place. At Leases of Cabrillo, there are a variety of places where children can congregate and play. The town center ultimately will be a large grassy area where they can recreate, but absolutely that will be that is part of the plan, both in various parts of the campus.
we're still with you. We're just continuing to look through the questions. We got a lot of statements from you. We appreciate the statements, but we're really interested in answering your questions too. So we're going to move to the next question here, right here in a second. Okay, a question just came in from Lawrence. With this EUL, will VA provide services to any non-veteran civilians? And again, we're going to go back to Steve Peck to answer this question.
The only non-veterans who will be on campus would be families of veterans. So every household has to have a veteran in it, it's only open to veterans and their families.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Peck. We appreciate that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Robert. I'm going to read the question. This is from Stacy. If no land can be bought or sold, why has UCLA done this and been allowed to stay on the campus? Why does Saffron and Associates, is the correct answer, she clarified that later, have a land acquisition cost of $425,000? And Tyler Monroe from TSA, if you could answer that, please.
I'd be happy to answer the second part. I'm not sure what the $425,000 amount is referred to. There is no land acquisition price. There is an annual lease payment of between $1 and $10,000 per year, but it's not. There's no $425,000 land acquisition cost for any project.
Will there be an area for service animals? And we're going to ask Steve Peck to answer this one.
At all of our sites, if there are service animals, they are allowed to bring them on campus. We've talked in the past, because we have so much space, about creating a larger area for dogs, but I haven't gotten that far yet. But definitely service animals are allowed to come with their veterans.
Thanks, Steve. Howard Hernandez, he asked, in the presentation by the principal developer, page 40 identifies constraints encountered. To what extent has the principal developer team obtained the necessary I'm so sorry, folks. We have another issue. Howard, Steve here. Hey, can you please resubmit that question? It got deleted. It will be answered. Next question, please. Okay, James asked us about workshops for veterans. The wood shop, metal shop, and auto shop. They're very helpful and very therapeutic. I'd like to assign this to Brian DeAndre. Would you take that question, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As part of the framework for a draft master plan, a workforce and enterprise area was conceptualized on the east side of Bondsville, on the lower part of the north campus. That area of the campus is outside of our purview, but I think it holds potential for these types of enterprise development and job skill development activities. What I can say is, with respect to the housing that we're developing on the north campus, resume building, job skills, job coordination are important activities that are part of our service planning, and we will certainly be working with our veterans to promote workforce development.
Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to answer that question. James asked about VA capital contribution.
Sure. So, let me get the camera on here. What the capital contribution refers to is the EUL statute allows VA to contribute minor construction funding for certain things as part of EUL projects. Specifically, if there are items that VA has a responsibility for example, if there's environmental contamination in buildings, or if there's infrastructure in terms of utilities that should be provided to buildings that aren't necessarily part of the enhanced use lease, VA can choose to either fix or address those things itself, or we can offer a contribution and have the EUL lessee, in this case the principal developer, do that work. So it's a decision on how best to accomplish that. In this case, we're talking about the trunk line, which ultimately, as I think Tyler showed, goes up Bondsville Avenue. It will house a whole lot of utilities to support the housing, but ultimately it runs through the VA main thoroughfare up there. VA has a responsibility to a certain extent when it comes to providing utilities, and what we're talking about is providing a contribution to the principal developer, who would then execute utility upgrades on our behalf. So essentially it's a different way of accomplishing work that needs to get done to support EULs, using the principal developer as our execution arm.
Thank you, Brett. Hey, we're going to go back to Howard Hernandez's question real quick. In the presentation by the principal developer, page 40 identifies constraints encountered. To what extent has the principal developer team obtained the necessary funding to commence and complete the initial phase 0? Has the funding ascertained been placed in trust for the purpose of accountability in lieu of the project completion of the various phases? Let's go back to Brett to answer that question.
So I'm actually going to ask the principal developer team to answer that. They're responsible for the financing of the projects themselves.
I'll take that. Hi, Tyler Monroe here. So buildings 205 and 208 have already started construction, or they're about to start construction. Building 207, which is the first project being completed by the principal developer, has secured all of its funding sources. It has awards of Triple H money from the City of Los Angeles, No Place Like Home funds from the County of Los Angeles, project-based Vash vouchers from the County of Los Angeles, low-income housing tax credits from the State of California, and tax-exempt bonds from the State of California as well. So combined, all 5 of those funding sources are sufficient to fully fund Building 207, and they're all specifically committed to the construction of Building 207, which is 60 units of housing for senior veterans, and they will only be funded into the project for that specific project. So that answers the question, but I'll hand it back to VA.
Tyler, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Our next question comes back to James Maddock. Why does this require a 75-year lease, use a 50-year lease? And we're going to assign that to Brett Sims.
So I'll start the answer and then ask if the principal developer team wants to chime in, but essentially it comes down to the financing component of these projects. The goal of these enhanced use leases is to not only do the initial retrofit or construction of the buildings, but also be able to recapitalize those buildings. If that would occur at, for example, year 30 or year 35, there's not enough term on a 50-year lease in order to secure financing to do another round of recapitalization. So taking it to the 75 years gives us that ability to ensure that there's opportunity to recapitalize these buildings, not just finance the initial upkeep piece of that. And Brian, Tyler, if you all want to add to that, please feel free.
Sure, I can build on that. Brett, it's common for regulatory agreements by public agencies to last at least 55 years. Clearly, the term of the regulatory agreement has to outstrip the term of the lease. In addition, for the tax credits to be generated and preserved and delivered to the investor, we need to show that the debt on the project, the soft debt from the various public agencies, can be repaid over a period of time, and typically an extended period of time, more than 55 years is required. And so that's really the basis of the 75-year lease term. It's really a financing mechanism.
Thank you for that. Jackson Hudgens, you asked a question. What is the VA doing in the short term to assist the homeless veterans who live just outside the VA campus, and why? Given the new camping initiative on VA grounds, are there still homeless veterans outside the VA? Mac?
Thanks. I could certainly talk about that. We do that in VSO town halls every fourth week, and we also do it with elected officials every second week. But I'd like Matt McGarren, who's here in the room with me, he's the chief of the Community Engagement and Reintegration Service, to talk about that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Matt McGarren. I'm the chief of the service program, the Community Engagement and Reintegration Services. And the question is about the veterans that are living in tents outside of our gate on San Vicente Boulevard. And while it is true that we do have short-term housing on campus for veterans that can reside in tents on campus while they wait to move on to some other transitional permanent housing, there are veterans that are still living outside the gate. And we do go out there and outreach to these veterans. We've met with virtually all of them on different occasions. We've also met with the individuals that are involved and donated the tents to those veterans, and we are offering services to the veterans if they are willing to come on campus and engage in our services. And generally speaking, the ones that are staying out on the outside the gate are the veterans that do not choose to come inside the gate. Also, along with that, we are using our county services to help make sure the area stays clean as much as we can. There are different services that are provided for these veterans. We do send our outreach teams out there to provide whatever services we can.
Thanks, Matt. We appreciate it. Okay, so we have the next question. Stacy, she says, what is going to happen to all the extra land around the North Campus? Is golf course, dog park, sports field? Why can't additional housing be built? Mac?
The draft master plan, the original draft master plan document done in 2015 into 2016, calls for an update to the master plan, and it moves from a draft to the actual master plan. And it calls for the update between year 3 and 5. So we're leaning into that, and by next year we'll have that completed. And we're looking at where we are today, what was contemplated in the beginning, what actions have been taken thus far. The properties you talk about in there are not contemplated in the draft master plan, but certainly could be contemplated for actions as we move forward. Part of the goal was to get to the more readily accessible properties that could create communities as opposed to reaching to some of the fringe properties that would be harder to make those communities and that were already under lease, that we had to work through the leases and look for the termination dates and other things with the leases. And we've tried to rescind or actually close out a lot of the leases as they were terminating and not renewing them. But the principal developer focus here tonight is on those areas and properties that would be right for creating communities more in the center of the campus.
Thank you, Mac. The next question, how can we get access to the slides for the nights and for the video? Yes, we'll go ahead and we'll provide that to you, and it'll be at the West LA Draft Master Plan website. So westladraftmasterplan.org. Okay? So, next question. What is going to happen to all the extra land around the North Campus, excuse me. Okay, what is going to happen to all the extra land around the North Campus is golf course, dog park, sports field, and why can't additional housing be built? We just answered that one. Okay. Okay, what's happening with the beachfront property that was included in the original deed? Mac?
So we're tracking 2 deed documents. The one for the West LA campus is a fully executed deed and recorded, and we have evidence of that. And that's really what this EUL meeting is about. We see where there's documents related to the beachfront property, and we're executing some research into that, but we do not see where it was fully executed and turned over to VA, and that's what we're trying to determine what actually happened so many years ago. I appreciate the question.
Okay, James, you say I have been to the cemetery and social distancing is never a problem. Open those gates.
The cemetery gates I've discussed, they're closed for a reason, and it's social distancing, and that's NCA, National Cemetery Administration policy. It's not a VBA policy, and it's not germane to the EUL here. Thank you.
Next question. There have been previous discussions about having a service dog training facility on campus. Is that something still under consideration, Mac?
So we're trying to make best use of the areas that we have, and that is something that has been worked out with the City of LA for the Veterans Barrington Park area. And in fact, they were to start some programs this summer, but for the COVID. So they backed off, and we're trying to wait and see what the environment allows. We're not allowing a lot of activities on this campus. It's business only, and it's really centered on health and welfare and medical care for the veterans and those that are residing on the campus in our community living center, our nursing facility, and our domiciliary and other areas. So the city is there as well, and they too are not doing a lot of activities. They have backed off. So we'll have to wait and see what the environment provides there. Thank you.
Okay, Mac, we actually have a follow-up question for you. With families and will likely have pets, will there be a dog park on campus for families with a dog? Let's go back to the principal developer for that.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, the master plan has been developed to a certain point. We've not actually developed it in detail to include a dog park, but that is entirely possible.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, R. Navarro asks, why isn't the VA providing the services? Why outsourced?
Thank you. To do development, capital development of this nature, we require partnerships. And in those partnerships, It's not only to develop the facility itself, but it's also to provide some of the services. If you can imagine, GLA has funding through the government, but the funding through the government is to provide services to the veterans here in our greater Los Angeles healthcare system. If we bring on additional veterans who are going to live and reside on the campus and require a lot of other different types of services, we don't have the immediate funding within our funding model for the VA to provide that, and that's where we rely on partners. It's sort of similar to the grant per diem and other programs where the partners provide the environments and the other things, and we pay for the programming and different activities, but we don't necessarily have all the resources to do all of the activities. When we stood up the Bridge Home here, the two dome structures on campus with 100 beds, of which they're using 50 socially distanced beds right now, they provide the social workers and they provide the care and the feeding and the other activities, and we pay for it, but we don't necessarily have the staff to do that and the capacity to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mac. Okay, the next question. Are the principal developers veteran-owned?
Steve, you're muted.
Thank you. We are, of our three partners, two of us are nonprofits and are the CEOs of both of those, myself and essentially CEO are veterans. We're both Vietnam vets, Vietnam combat vets, and Thomas Haffron is our third partner, and they really provide a connection with the local Brentwood community. They've been there for more than 40 years. So the U.S. Vets, which will be leading the service provision, is veteran-led, and we've been doing this for 26 years.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. We actually have another question here for you. What metrics are being employed to determine the success of this program?
We do an annual performance report where we measure not only output but outcomes. Our goal is to make veterans as independent as possible, and we measure that in a number of different ways. We provide mental health assistance, and we do pre and post with that. We do those groups, as I mentioned, therapeutic groups in a variety of different areas. We look at their rent payment history. Are they stable? Is their income stable? Maybe if their rent it gets behind their rent, maybe their income has been impacted. We look at that. So we look at every aspect of their lives to make sure that they are living independently and successfully. There'll be a whole, we measure, as I said, we measure in a bunch of different ways, and that is available if anyone cares to see it.
What current plans are in place to prevent non-veterans from accessing the services on campus through the LA Metro? Mac?
Well, obviously we do have our standard processes and procedures in place to determine who's an eligible veteran and who is not an eligible veteran on campus. We will continue those, and we do those with our partners every day in the community. In this instance, through the EUL and the principal developer, those partners will be on campus here with us. How they get here and how they transit, whether it be by metro, bike, pedestrian, is irrelevant to the services that they're eligible for or not eligible for. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mac. So right now at this time, we have almost routed through most of the questions, and we might have one more come in. Wait, do we have one more?
Not yet. Any because
So, Stacy Travers, if you're still with us, you've asked some questions that we would like to answer, but we're not sure we quite understand the question. So if you would mind, go ahead and writing your question out fully and kind of explain where you're going with that so we can get you the answer, okay? We don't want to miss anybody. Who is OAEM?
Certainly. OAEM stands for the Office of Asset Enterprise Management. We are the program office for the Enhanced Use Lease program. We are based out of Washington, D.C., although we do have some staff on site there at the West LA campus. We're part of the CFO organization, Office of Management for the department, and we essentially run the EUL program for all of our locations.
Mike is muted. Okay, so I've asked Stacy Travers to go ahead and respond back to us, but we understand that Tyler Monroe understands your questions and he's going to address those. So Tyler, would you mind going ahead and...
The question I have from Stacy Travers is about $425,000 for acquisition costs, and we did a little research to understand where that came from. It comes from our California Tax Credit Allocation Committee application for the low-income housing tax credits. That $425,000 number is for off-site improvement, so it's for improving the sidewalk and streets on Vandergrift and in Bonsall. It's the way that the state and that specific state agency, TCAC, categorizes off-site improvements like work on Vandergrift or Bonsall. So that's what that is referring to. The acquisition cost for land itself is $1 per year for the lease. So that addresses that question.
Thank you, Tyler. I have a statement here by Mr. Navarro. Two of my questions were not answered. Mr. Navarro, would you go ahead and resend those questions? We're going to answer that question tonight, or both those questions tonight. Thank you.
That's one right there. And that should be the principal developer. And Brentwood.
Okay, so who will manage the housing and issue? All right, we're going to go back to the principal developer to answer
This
this.
is Brian DeAndrea. Each building will be managed by a property management organization affiliated with one of our organizations, and we will retain primary responsibility for managing each of those buildings and the residents therein. We intend to establish an association, a master association, to oversee the totality of the North Campus and establish and enforce a set of community rules for the North Campus. That will require the participation of all the property management organizations on the North Campus, as well as the VA itself and the VA Police Department and other local law enforcement.
Thank you. We appreciate you answering that question. Michael asks, can veterans who currently have Vash voucher who live elsewhere be able to transfer their Vash voucher to live at GLAHS when the housing is complete? Matt?
Yeah, the answer to that question is yes. The voucher is a permanent housing subsidy for a veteran, and the veteran can move from any place that will take the permanent housing subsidy. So any landlord that would do that, including its principal developer. So yes, they could move from their residence now into this residence when it goes to that.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any plans to sell the Brettwood School building and land to the Brentwood School? Matt, sir?
Thank you. I spoke earlier about the lease that ends in 2026. The Brentwood School building Brentwood School itself is not on any VA property that I'm aware of. And the West LA Leasing Act prevents the sale of any of the property here in the West LA. So we're talking about the enhanced use leases, we're talking about service leases. There's no sale of property taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. My understanding is there's a new third-party leader for parking at zero rent. Is that correct?
I don't even know. Can I answer that? Well, then let me try and answer that. Oh, okay.
Tax credit?
Well, let me try and answer maybe the way I think it's being asked. If we're talking about the parking lot and parking, the ability to park there for veterans is free, if that's what you're trying to drive at, for zero cost. If there's a tax issue there, I'm not quite sure how we're getting to taxes. Okay. I have a list here with a couple of questions on it. Let me see if I can get to some of it. There were some pro forma questions about the hearing notice. Why does the hearing notice present a lease term of 75 years when the maximum provided under the West Los Angeles Leasing Act as amended is 50 years? I think if I could pass that to Brent Sims, if you could answer that.
Sure. So the West LA Leasing Act has two different types of references in it. The 50 years is specific to the service leases that can be done on the West LA campus. However, the 75 years actually comes from the EUL statute. So Title 38 USC 8161 through 69 allows for up to 75 years for enhanced use leases. The West LA Leasing Act doesn't actually change that term. It does limit the ability where we can't sell the property, but it doesn't change the term of the leases. The 50 years is specifically in reference to service leases that is separate and distinct from the enhanced use lease.
Hey, thank you, Brad. So we're still working through some of these questions. It is very likely surrounding cities will send non-veteran homeless people on a one-way ticket to the VA Purple Line. Will LA City or County have a contingency plan to help these people on site as they are not veterans? Matt, would you like to take this?
So we can only serve eligible veterans in our homeless programs now. So if somebody were to send somebody to our campus with in need of housing services and they were not an eligible veteran, eligible for VA healthcare services veteran, we would refer them out to our community partners, and we have several community partners that would help us in that situation.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you taking the time to answer that one. Okay, will West LA VA provide new employment for veterans during financing, design, developing, constructing, operating, and
Steve, I can take this if you like. This is Brian, and feel free to build on that. As part of our commitment to the VA in terms of our RFQ response, we committed to exercising best efforts to maximize the participation of veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses in our contracting for the project. And so we've established some best efforts targets, and we've got combined a very good and healthy track record in achieving similar requirements on other affordable housing projects. And so the short answer to that question is yes, that is our intention, and that contemplates both procurement activities as well as job training and apprenticeship training opportunities as well for veterans.
Thank you. The next question comes in from James. Is the church going to be restored? Matt?
Rob? Thanks, Steve. I'll go ahead and take that question. So the church that's being referred to is the Wadsworth Chapel that's right at the entrance of our campus on the northwest corner of Wilshire Boulevard in Bonsall. So the answer to that question is simply yes. A little bit more complex answer is that in order to do that, we had to find a way to enable the raising of the funds to redevelop that structure. It was estimated to be about $20 million. So last year we used one of the lease authorities that Max spoke about at the very top of his presentation, service leases, to solicit a lease for the rehabilitation renovation of the Wadsworth Chapel and then its subsequent operation to provide services for veterans on the campus. We should have an announcement about the award of that lease within the next 45 to 60 days.
Thank you, Rob. The next question talks about our homeless. With the large population of homeless veterans in Los Angeles, 1,500 seems to be a very small number of units compared to the point-in-time count. How was this number of units determined? I believe that the number is actually 1,200, not 1,500, but we're going to ask Matt to answer this question.
So the number of on-campus permanent housing would be 1,200, but we have a number of other opportunities for veterans to move into permanent housing in the community. We have housing, VA housing vouchers that our veteran can use with any landlord that would take the voucher. So we do house about 2,000 veterans every year right now, and we intend to increase that capacity as we move along. So we do have vouchers even today available for veterans that are eligible to use them.
Hey, Matt, stay with us real quick. Will veterans be charged to live on campus?
Actually, Steve Peck would answer that question better than I would.
Yes, we will have Vash vouchers and potentially other vouchers on campus, so they'll be paying some portion of their income. It's usually 30% of their income, whatever that is. And this is a standard for permanent supportive housing throughout the country.
Okay, great, thank you. James asked, why do vets not have free entry to the baseball games on the property? Oh, hey, they do have free entry, according to Rob Merchant, so I guess all you need is an ID card. Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
Who is the third-party operator of the parking lot?
Okay, so they're asking who the third-party company is in the parking lot. Matt, sir?
So the company that is monitoring the State Park parking lot is called State Park LA, and they have a provider there every evening that's there overnight for the veterans that are in the parking lot. They can stay in the parking lot from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And that's who monitors.
Thank you, Matt. So we're getting right to these questions really fast. It's really good. See. Okay, so Stacy asked, did the original deed require payment by veterans for living there?
We'll find out. I think so.
Stacy, we'll check on that, but we don't have any records telling us that information that far back. Let me have a sheet here with a few questions that came in that were, I guess, prior to the meeting. Why weren't veteran service organizations provided proper notice of this hearing until yesterday, excluding American Legion, post 283, 2 weeks ago, and why was the public hearing not noticed in the Federal Register? The requirement was notice in a prominent media, either print or electronic, and we did that through the LA Times, which we know has limited print but mostly electronic distribution. The requirement was 1 day. We did 3 days. We ensured we had a weekend in there. We also posted it. We've talked about it on our town halls. It's through our Draft Master Plan website. Yesterday we did robocalls to all of our veterans in the GLA system that started yesterday and went again today. Some were notified yesterday, some were notified today, and some were notified twice, I heard. I got a notification, as did some of the other employees that I work with who are veterans and use GLA for healthcare. We also reached out to our stakeholder email list, our congressional email list, and we worked with our BCOED, our oversight board, and we worked with our CVEP, our Community Veteran Engagement Board. And the purpose was not for us to reach every single veteran. And I can tell you Matt McGarren here had flyers out with the care treatment rehabilitative service, the tent area, and we did outreach outside the gate to veterans there. But by no means can we reach 4,000 homeless veterans, nor can we reach 90,000 or 2.5 million veterans in this greater Los Angeles area, our jurisdiction. The concept is, and the requirement is, to get notice out, and these are great things that the service organizations and other partners for us really help spread the word. And I think the fact that we have this many folks engaged and this many questions shows that we do have good engagement on this. And we were reviewing the questions and answers earlier from the 2015-2016 period of the Draft Master Plan, and there was good engagement, and many of the individuals we're engaged with now were also part of those discussions. Why are private developers involved with West LA VA when all of the underlying finance is coming from public funds? The rent subsidies are coming from HUD, and all of the taxes are exempt. So why would private developers be involved? Mr. Brett Sims, could I ask?
I mean, the simple answer to that one is VA doesn't actually have the authority to develop housing. So yes, as I think Tyler explained, there are a series of funding sources that are used for these typical EUL projects. Some of them are tax credits. HUD Vash is certainly one of the components on the operational side. But the reality is we have to partner with third parties in order to deliver housing. So while it's VA assets in the land and the buildings that are being leveraged, we can't do construction, operation, or anything else related to the housing. That's why we bring partners in.
This is Brian DeAngelo. I'll just build upon Brett's response. This is the model that's being employed here is the public-private partnership model, and this is the primary mechanism by which affordable housing around the country is created. It was a program that was established in 1986 and has benefited from broad bipartisan support. The tax credit program has delivered millions of units of affordable housing around the country, and at its heart is this concept of a partnership between the private and the public sector. The public sector has largely gotten out of the business of delivering and managing affordable housing and has placed accountability for the delivery and management of that affordable housing on the private sector. And so with the principal developer team, you have 3 very experienced organizations that will be working with the VA to deliver and manage this housing on the VA campus. So this is not something that's specific to the VA campus. This is a program that is has been widely deployed around the country.
Thanks, Joanne, for answering those questions. Our next question comes from Michael. Wouldn't it be better to take care of existing buildings rather than just let them get dilapidated due to non-use and then later more expensive repair? How can we prevent this from happening currently and in the future, not just at GLA, but also at Sepulveda and possibly at other VA locations nationwide? Mr. Behrman?
I'll take a stab at answering that question. GLA operates on about a $1.1 billion budget for its healthcare mission. As we look at all the buildings that we own on the Sepulveda campus, in the Los Angeles campus, and here in West LA campus, our cost of bringing every building up to code is about $1 billion. Our budget that we receive for building maintenance each year is between $12 and $15 million. So because we apply the vast majority, 99.9% of our money, to the mission of healthcare, we don't have the funds to continue to renovate buildings that are unoccupied. That's the bottom line. So this enhanced use lease process enables us through other funding mechanisms to renovate buildings for more appropriate use, such as housing of our homeless veterans. Next question.
Thank you, Dr. Braverman. We got a comment here from Lorraine. Oh my goodness, statewide, we are all supporting this issue and advocate to get this done, especially those of us at the Capitol, to have their voice heard. Thank you for sharing it with us. Michael, this would have prevented all those buildings, including the chapel and other buildings at both locations. Not a question, but thank you. What are the plans for the Wadworth and Brentwood Theater? Rob?
Sure, thanks, Steve. Those two questions have to be taken somewhat separately right now. For people who don't know, there are two large theaters on the campus here at West LA. One, the Wadsworth Theater, was operational until just a couple of years ago. Some of the plumbing and other pipes in the building became non-operational, and it's been closed since that time. The Brentwood Theater, which is more on the northern part of the campus by the Calvet home, has been unoperational for quite some time. So for the Brentwood Theater, I would turn that over to the principal developer.
Rob, this is Brian. I do not believe the Brentwood Theater is one of the assets that's been identified as part of our current purview.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'll finish answering that question in the way of answering the next question that I was going to read from some that came in by email, and I'll read the question and then provide an answer. Other than the names of buildings and parking lots, people that I know and I who have read the draft master plan and its public or PEIS, Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, never saw any information whatsoever about the plans regarding how 18 of 21 buildings and 6 of 6 parking lots will be used, if even for veterans at all. Why hasn't that information been provided to the public, and why do you think you can have a final hearing about and enter into any land use agreement for those assets? So let me distinguish a little bit between the draft master plan of 2016 and where we are today. We really described that draft master plan not in terms of a master plan that you might see in terms of a master planned community, but it was really a roadmap and a pathway envisioning a community of 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing together with all the service-enriched programs that would come along with that to support the veterans who would be living there. The selection of the principal developer in late 2018 was the next step in kind of filling in the boundaries of that roadmap, or almost painting the lines on the highway. So that was the next step. Following the issuance in September of last year of our record of decision in the PEIS, the principal developer began presenting its community plan, and that's involved into the plan that you saw presented tonight. So there has been engagement with various groups here on campus, with our Federal Advisory Committee, the Veterans Community Oversight and Engagement Board, and now those of you who have called in or tuned in to watch this conference. It's an evolution of that draft master plan as a concept, as a roadmap, into a plan on how we're actually going to effectuate that. And so I would put the two theaters in that category. They are not currently within the footprint that the principal developer has, but like we are using the service lease authority to bring the Wadsworth Chapel back to life, we are looking at the possibility of using that same authority to consider operation of those two theaters. And lastly, there's a question from Stacy. I think the question, Stacy, you were really getting to was the Barrington Village parking lot. And this gets confusing because we have a program operated by an organization called Safety Park. And the parking lots that are entered off Barrington Avenue on the very northwest corner of the campus are operated by a company called Safety Park, which is a commercial parking lot operator. That is another of the service leases that we described. We had to enter into those leases in order to operate those lots. We could no longer have them open for free parking for any member of the community to use for shopping at Barrington Village. So those parking lots, starting about a year ago, have been refurbished. They are automated. Veterans are allowed to park for free. The parking lot operator only takes its operating expenses, and all revenues come back to the campus. And there are some other services that go along with that, but since we're getting low on time, I will continue on further. Steve?
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so we're kind of nearing the end of this. I have just a few more, I guess, questions. So the tax credit for building 207, was that actually a tax credit for utility works?
I am. Building 207 received tax credits for the entirety of the project, Building 207, and the cost for the offsite works is just one component of a $30 million project. So the entire project is, tax credit eligible, and tax credits were received on that. And the offsite improvements that are noted for $425,000 is part of that, one part of it. Thank you.
Okay, so another question we have from Stacy. Is that land now occupied by illegal third parties? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I don't know what. Stacy, we're not quite sure. We want to make sure that we answer all your questions, and as you write those questions, if we don't have enough background, it's hard for us to answer that question, and that's what we have here. So don't think we're dodging it. We just don't know. Look, I got 2 minutes. I'm wrapping up. Okay. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this public hearing with us for the Enhanced Use Lease. If you have any more questions, please go ahead and continue to send those to myself. That's Stephen.Ruh@va.gov, STEVEN.RUH@va.gov. Also include Janet Rice. That's JANET.Rice, RICE, #2 @va.gov. All questions and answers will be posted by the end of the summer. Written comments must be received no later than 5 p.m. on July 3rd.